Check.
Yep.
All right. Audacity is picking up the correct microphone.
Good. How do you check that? I can check which microphone I'm supposedly doing as input.
You click on the audio meter for the microphone and then hit start monitoring.
Yep. And then you
it's
hit mute.
Ghosted.
Oh,
start monitoring as ghosted.
Ghosted.
Yeah.
Check.
Or if you've got 3, 2, 1, then you hit the button that says audio setup.
Check.
Well.
Check.
Or hit the little microphone button right there to the left of the meter.
Yeah. It has start monitoring ghosted and it has options.
It's got it ghosted. What's that all about?
It shouldn't be ghosted.
It should not be ghosted.
Because that means you have no microphone.
Well, the meter is saying I do.
Is the meter going up and down?
Oh, yes.
Then you're fine. Now mute your microphone and see if it stops going up and down.
Moss, it means you're monitoring right now.
Yeah.
That's why it's ghosted.
Oh, okay.
You can shut that off. I don't know why they leave it shut off by default, but
at any rate, it's working.
Okay, yeah, that was a close one. I'm going to trust 3, 2, 1. I don't know why, but I don't feel like installing the old version and reconfiguring it.
Only takes a couple seconds to reconfigure it.
I set it to a different temporary directory and all that crap. So
are we ready to go?
Yeah, I think so.
3, 2, 1, record.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, record. Radio. Sync time. 3, 2, 1, 0. Close enough for government work. Should we get started?
I think we should.
All right. Flying by the seat of our pants. Except I'm not wearing any, but you don't need to know that.
Do now. That makes 2 of us.
I don't ever wear pants.
You're welcome, audience.
Okay. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 399. This is episode 399.5, recorded on Sunday, the 30th of October, 2022. I'm Moss.
I'm not frozen yet. I'm Joe.
By the way, I'm Bill.
First up in the news, the Kudu is out with a lobster on its tail. Fedora 36 is dragging. The next kernel takes less power from the people. Steam Snap switches stacks. Flatpak gets Meson, and Linus wants to forget about 486. In security and privacy, we get the first security update for the Kudu. Then in our wanderings, Joe goes to Micro Center, Moss is having a ball, and Bill is clouding around. In our innards section, we continue our historical journey through Linux distros, and finally the feedback and a couple of suggestions. Well, we haven't decided to pick stories here, have we? Okay, go for it, Joe.
Okay, first up in the news, Ubuntu 22.10 is available to download. It's live. Ubuntu 22.10 Kinetic Kudu is available to download. Ubuntu 22.10 comes with a number of improvements to the user experience, a new sound server, new text editor app, and Linux kernel 5.19. It also boasts better than ever support for the Raspberry Pi single board computer. The relatively recent GNOME 43 release delivers the bulk of the key changes in Ubuntu 22.10. After passing on shipping GTK4 libadwaita ports.
Bundles are shipping now, but you
Real professional.
Sorry about that. The relatively recent GNOME 43 release delivers the bulk of the key changes in Ubuntu 22.10. After passing on shipping GTK4 libadwaita ports in April, Ubuntu developers finally embraced them here in the Kinetic Kudu. By far the most striking change is the new Quick Settings menu. The grid-based pod-like layout draws inspiration from other desktop OSs, including those on mobile, to provide a more actionable area to interact with. The layout of the top row varies between desktop and laptops, with users of the latter seeing a battery level icon on the left. And this article is from OMG Ubuntu. Which leads well into our next article, if nobody has anything to mention on this one.
I haven't looked at any of them yet, admittedly.
Also, OMG Ubuntu 23.04 code name revealed, and it's a lucidly likable label. According to Launchpad, home of Ubuntu development, and a cryptic tweet from the official Ubuntu Twitter account, Ubuntu 23.04 is labeled Lunar Lobster. Rather a lively combination with which to liken the next interim release of the much-loved desktop Linux distribution, isn't it? But what does it mean? Ubuntu 23.04 is due for release on April 27th, 2023. We'll begin to learn more about what's in store for the release once development opens up and packages start to trickle in. We can make a few guesses about what to expect, though. A new Linux kernel, new graphics drivers, and a load of updated software are a given. GNOME 44 is likely the feature too, and maybe, just maybe, Ubuntu's new Flutter-based installer will, after years of development, make its long-awaited appearance.
Now, this article did also include an explanation of the naming convention that they use there, but it didn't seem very interesting, so I didn't include it in the show notes.
There's a crab on the moon. Who cares?
Yep. Okay, and that leads us into Fedora Linux 36 update, which it's delayed. Fedora Linux 37 is going to be late, very late. Here's why. As you may have heard, the OpenSSL project announced a version due to be released on Tuesday. It will include a fix for a critical severity bug. We won't know the specifics of the issue until Tuesday's release, but it could be significant. As a result, the Fedora team decided to delay the release of Fedora Linux 37, and they are now targeting a release day of November 15th, and that's from Fedora Magazine. Which maybe that should have gone into security, but it feels more like news.
And I wonder if we're not mentioning it here on the show, but there is a bit of a brouhaha about Fedora dropping at H.264 support. And I doubt it's got anything to do with the delay, but it seems kind of coincidental to it all. But moving on, Linux 6.2 likely to enjoy measurable power savings while idle or lightly loaded. And this is from Phoronix. Work carried out by Google engineers and others around the Linux kernel's read copy update, or RCU, if you will, synchronization mechanism to make it lazier is helping with 5 to 10% power savings for idle or lightly loaded systems. This lazy RCU work is likely to be merged for the Linux 6.2 kernel merge window in December. Google engineers have been working on this lazy RCU implementation, given that the RCU mechanism can be a major consumer of power on battery-powered systems. Lazy RCU is about batching RCU callbacks and then flushing them after a timed delay or otherwise hitting memory pressure. The short story for Linux end users is the lazy RCU can provide roughly 5 to 7 or 5 to 10% power savings for idle or lightly loaded systems by this lazy slash batching functionality. From the lazy RCU patch series sums it up. Implementation timer-based RCU callback batching, otherwise known as lazy callbacks. With this, we can save about 5 to 10% of power consumed due to RCU requests that happen when the system is lightly loaded or idle. By default, all async callbacks queued via call underscore RCU are marked lazy. An alternate API call underscore RCU underscore flash is provided for the few users. For example, synchronize underscore RCU that need the old behavior. The batch is flushed whenever a certain amount of time has passed, or the batch on a particular CPU grows too big. Also, memory pressure will flush it in a future patch. Yeah, okay.
Basically, yeah, it's a different way to do the read copy update system that's going to give you better battery life in your laptops,
Yeah.
which is always interesting.
Yeah, because I think, that as much work has been done on other platforms for increasing battery life, that's always been one of the compromises, I think, with running Linux. And it seems counterintuitive too, because you look at some systems and they seem to be running far less processes, and they seem to be doing far less, but then some of the other platforms seem to have power management down a little bit better than we do.
Yeah, it's
So,
almost always those background optimizations that you get with vendors working with Microsoft
yeah.
or with Mac in order to optimize for their systems on those operating systems. And obviously, you rarely get that with Linux. So anything that helps out with the battery consumption, and in this case, is a background thing that's running, is appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay, Canonical Steam Snap will let you switch Mesa stacks. From OMG Ubuntu, Ubuntu gamers will soon be able to pick which Mesa graphics stack Canonical's Steam Snap app uses. Canonical plans to package different Mesa snapshots as content snaps, which are decoupled and packaged separately from a parent app, in this case the Steam Snap, which is still for now in, quote, early access, end quote. Quote, we know that gamers are eager to get their hands on the latest Mesa, and we've made that even easier with the latest update to the Steam Snap, end quote, writes Canonical's Oliver Smith in a blog post. 3 tracks will be available for gamers to switch between at some point in the near future. OIBAF-latest, Bleeding Edge Keyshack-fresh, latest Mesa Point release, and Keyshack-turtle stable release. The new Mesa content snaps will be packaged separately from the main Steam Snap, allowing the core app to remain stable while switching out the graphics drivers it uses.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Being able to switch between the different Mesa versions relatively easily.
Boy, has Steam come a long way with all this stuff.
Well, yeah, they haven't had much choice. They had to get
Yeah.
better with the release of the
Well, they
Steam
had
Deck.
choice. They could have run Windows.
Yeah.
We're glad they didn't.
Yeah. Because it's arguable whether running Windows or focusing on Windows, at least, for the sake of their platform, would have been beneficial for them as a company, but they chose not to. And
they were looking to make the Steam Deck as low cost as possible so that they
Yeah.
could sell it at cost or just under cost in order to be able to make money by selling games. The easiest way to do that was to cut out the Windows tags.
And I always had this feeling with Proton. And it's, Proton's been around for a while now. Certainly been around longer before the Steam Deck than it has since the Steam Deck. And it always felt like they were building up to something, that this was something in the works that was going to be meaningful. And certainly it has, And then people can debate all day long whether or not Proton is actually damaging in some way to the state of Linux gaming because there's less development going on in native Linux gaming. But the truth is more people can play games on Linux now than they ever could in the past and ever would be able to had we have kept going the direction we were going. So I say kudos to them. So moving on, Flatpak 1.15 released with initial Meson building system support. And this is from Phoronix. Flatpak 1.15 was released on Monday as the newest test release for this increasingly used open source sandboxing and app distribution tech. New with Flatpak 1.15.0 is allowing it to build under the popular Meson build system as an alternative to AutoTools. Flatpak developers are already looking at phasing out the AutoTools build system support either during this current 1.15 unstable cycle or the 1.17. Flatpak 1.15 also now allows the modify_IDT system calls as part of tech allow equals multi-arch user usage in order to support running 16-bit executables with some versions of Wine. The lack of modify_IDT system call access was preventing Wine from running within Flatpak in some configurations. However, modified_IDT LDT prevents the possibility of information leakage, and Flatpak developers acknowledge the possibility of it increasing the attack surface. The modify_LDT system call is used for reading and writing to the local descriptor table, or LDT, if you will, of a system process. Flatpak 1.15 also now shares the GSS proxy socket for acting like a portal for Kubernetes authentication, a HTTP-backed variable for programs like GNOME software to detect compatibility with libflatpak and a variety of bug fixes.
HTTP backend, yep. Oh, we're having fun today.
No,
No,
we're all here. Time on target.
I'm not all here. What are you talking about?
Oh gosh, trying to keep it positive. You know what I'm saying?
I'm at least half here.
Yeah.
Okay. Linus Torvald suggests the 80486 architecture belongs in a museum, not in the Linux kernel. From the Register, Linux boss Linus Torvalds has contemplated ending support for the i486 processor architecture in the Linux kernel. The ancient architecture was up for discussion last week in a thread titled Multi-Gen LRU Support Page Table Walks that considered how the kernel can better handle least recently used LRU lists, a means of tracking memory pages. As Torvalds surveyed contributors' codes, he appears to have been frustrated by the need to include workarounds that cater to older CPUs. He therefore suggested ending support for old kit could be an easier way to solve memory matters. We got rid of i386 support back in 2012. Maybe it's time to get rid of i486 support in 2022, he wrote.
Yeah. I'm going to have to agree, considering it was the 90s the last time anybody, really used a 486. No.
Well, my architecture is more ancient than that, but that's all right.
Yeah. Really? You've got something older than a 486?
No, me.
Well, yes, you.
Oh
Technically,
well, by that
I'm-
logic,
I'm-
we're all
I'm
three
older than a 486.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
older than a 386.
Torvald
so-
did suggest that if some developers stepped up to handle that part
Right.
of the project, that they could do it, but nobody was doing it, so why bother?
Right. I mean, if there's someone out there or a team out there that is actively using 486s, then by all means, let them take over the kernel updates. But
I
yeah,
believe he said that if you're using legacy architecture, why not use the legacy kernel?
yeah.
I agree.
Technically, the architecture debuted in 1989, and then the Pentium took over in 1993. Now, I do remember using a 486 in 1999, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say that most people have moved on from there, and either they can use an outdated kernel and keep running it, or they can start developing on their own.
Well, I was using my 486 until at least 03 or 04, because that's what I first ran Linux on, and that I didn't start using Linux
That's-
until 02.
That's still almost 20 years. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and as far as that goes, to be clear, you can still use a machine with this architecture. You'll still have access to an older kernel. It just perhaps we should be using resources to move forward. And if you're concerned about it and you have a machine like that, maybe don't pay your bills on it. Maybe don't do any shopping on it. Maybe don't do anything that is going to make you vulnerable, you know.
Right. And most all Linux distributions have stopped developing for 32-bit
Yeah.
anyway. And so yeah, you're not going to see 486 support as it is in a lot of kernels.
Right. So I don't have a huge problem with that at all.
Okay, then, that's it for the news. Let's move into security and privacy.
All right. First and only up in security and privacy, Ubuntu 22.10 gets first kernel security update to address recent Wi-Fi stack vulnerabilities. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. Thanks for filling that out for me. Canonical published today the first Linux kernel security update for its recently released Ubuntu 22.10 operating system series to address recently discovered Wi-Fi stack security vulnerabilities. Ubuntu 22.10 arrived last week on October 20th, and it ships with Linux kernel 5.19 by default. The first kernel security patch arrived today to address a total of 6 security vulnerabilities discovered by various security researchers in the upstream kernel packages. So yeah, not much in the security department today, and I don't know if that's because there wasn't a whole lot in security or just because we didn't pick up a whole lot in security.
I looked briefly for something interesting enough to bring up, and I just came up empty this week. So yeah.
Yeah, I started
Okay.
looking for articles, and then I saw that the articles I was looking at was from like August or something.
Right.
All right, moving on. In our biweekly wanderings, I can't even say it now. In our biweekly wanderings, I had one of my Logitech M570 trackballs just stop working again. Last episode, I took it apart and put it back together, and it worked once, then never again. I went to Amazon and found the new model M575 selling for half the price of a new M570 or even a refurbished M570. I've had a love-hate relationship with the M570. They tend to have the left button wear out in about 2 years on average, and are not easy to work on. Just ask Joe.
Oh yeah, they're a pain to work on. Still, you should send me that M570 so I can work on it.
I will. Dale Miracle had gotten an M575 and really liked it, so I pulled the trigger. I really like it. It has a slightly lower profile, and the ball seems more reachable from better angles. Everything is precise. Time will tell if it has durability. These trackballs used to be bulletproof. The old USB corded model lasted so long, I probably still have one in a box somewhere.
I have one out in the garage that I will pull out and use on occasion. It's also the one I usually take to work.
Distro Hoppers Digest just scored its second over 1,000 download episode, and we just recorded episode 37 with me, Dale, and Josh Hawk. The edit was ready to review yesterday, and I forgot to review it yesterday, so I've got to get back to Tony with that later today. I still haven't missed a week of Full Circle Weekly News, truly a team production, as I only edit and read the news sent me from Eric the Unready, who is in South Africa, and sent it on to Ronnie in Scotland for publishing. I also learned of an exciting podcast that combines Foss with crafting called Foss and Crafts. You may want to give that a listen. Got a link in the show notes. I posted the recordings from my concert on Festival Living Room September 2020 to my Bandcamp page and added a few extras. While these are not studio recordings, the sound quality is close. Of course, if I make mistakes, they say there. Subbing jobs have been occurring every so often, but I'm getting really positive reception at Granger High School. Lots of ego boo as students come into the room and at least one of them shouts, "Best sub ever!" I'm only able to do most 2 days a week, and they pay bonuses for Mondays and Fridays, so guess which days I'm available. I finally got my little trooper of a Mazda 2 to the shop for maintenance. Turns out she really needed it. Ball joints, front brakes and rotors, clutch. We put over 40,000 miles on her with no expenses except tires, gas, and oil changes. It's about time she got some updates. What it cost put me in a temporary freak out, but I got over it. I was expecting struts or CV joints. I'm glad they were okay. I haven't gotten it back from the shop yet. They're waiting for a good clutch to come in. That's it for me. What do you got, Joe?
Well, yeah, you should definitely send me that M570. I saw that Bill had one, and he also had a different trackball there. Was that the Jellycomb you had there?
This is it's the one with the little thing at the bottom.
Oh, the MX. That's the
Yeah.
MX Ergo. I have the MX Ergo. I have the Jellycomb. I like the Jellycomb as a lower cost option. I've tried out a couple.
As I said, I have the Jellycomb as well, and the ball is awfully sloppy. So
Yeah,
These
other than that, I like
570s,
it.
though, I've got 4 of these 570s.
I've had a lot of 570s over the years.
I got one I take on the road with me, and it is starting to get worn out. So it is what it is.
Which
yeah,
is my point. The old Logitech trackballs never wore out.
Yeah. Well, they did. It just took like 5 to 10 years for the left click to wear out, and yeah, I miss being able to get those easily. I mean, I used to go out of my way to not order the wireless ones and just get the wired ones, and then they just got more and more expensive as less of them were available.
Yeah.
But yeah. Moving on. I went to Micro Center the other day since my VA appointment took me close by. They had nothing in the way of Raspberry Pis, except for the Picos, but I was able to pick up a couple of spools of PLA to print with. I'm thinking that I would also like to try out TPU one of these days as well. TPU is a softer material you can use to 3D print like phone cases and things like that, just because it's more malleable. Also picked up a 1 terabyte M.2 SSD at half the normal price, so I think I paid $54 for it. That will be taking the place of the 2.5-inch SSD that I currently have in my server, which is 500 gig, but that'll require me duplicating the hard drive and then expanding. Although I might just copy my home and then start from scratch. But it should be fun and interesting to talk about. I also found out that Micro Center sells a PS2, a PlayStation 2 style wired controller for $1.99. So I bought 2 of them for testing out on Batacera on the 1GX. They work really well, and for the price, there's really nothing to complain about when it comes to those. Maybe the buttons are a little mushy, but at $1.99, I'll accept that. Batacera is also working really well on the 1GX, a couple of updates and some settings changes to get the screen resolution how I want. And I've been playing some Super Mario 1 and 3 when I have spare time. Granted, that's not very often, but at least I'm getting some play in. More on the controller front, I was watching some 3D printing videos the other day, and someone started talking about the 8-bit Do Pro 2 Plus and how they had 3D printed the right trigger and replaced it, and talked about how easy the right trigger broke because it had happened on like 2 of his 8-bit Do controllers. I figured it was a fairly common occurrence, and that would be a fun fix and an easy way to get a really good controller at a lower cost. So I went to eBay and looked, and I was kind of surprised that I was only able to find one. And now the description on the eBay selling did say that the right trigger was broken, but it did not say how. So I assumed that it was broken in the same way that most break. I was able to win the auction for like 99 cents plus shipping. So I 3D printed the trigger, and I also 3D printed a phone clip for it so that I could mount my phone to the controller. Then the controller showed up in the mail, and absolutely nothing was wrong with it. It looks and feels completely new, no blemishes whatsoever. The right trigger works perfectly. Now, it did take a little while to start charging the battery, but after that, I have had zero issues with it. And I have been using it with my phone to play my favorite game of all time, the Genesis version of Shadowrun. Don't know if I mentioned it, but the controller is, you can either run it Bluetooth or wired. And like I said, it has worked great. I've had no problems with it whatsoever.
Those are the kind of surprises you love.
Yeah. I mean, it's much better than actually, having to do the work. And I'll be able to keep that piece of plastic around in case the right trigger does break. But yeah, I prefer them to show up less broken than they say, as opposed to a lot more broken than they say, which has happened. Now, I have been doing a lot of 3D printing and design over the last 2 weeks, like a lot. My 3D printer has been running almost nonstop for the past 2 weeks. I was still having some trouble after the last show where the PTFE tubing was getting ripped out of the connector port partway through prints, and I had already replaced nearly everything from the power box all the way up to the hot end. So I reloaded the firmware and slightly reduced the extrusion steps, and everything has been working really well since then, barring some issues with bed leveling and me setting the leveling a little bit too close. Now, I have printed out a large volume of Halloween decorations, including spider webs, pumpkins, some Nightmare Before Christmas figures, and things like that in various different colors, mostly, for my wife, and trying out different densities and really getting those settings dialed in and testing out different things. I also pulled out some PET G, and I have been doing some printing with that. It's a little bit more difficult when you're doing something with precision because the PET G tends to shrink a little bit. I've printed out a few utility knife handles, which come in handy for opening boxes, cleaning up prints, things like that. And just a couple more headphone holders. I made, there's a couple of really interesting GoPro mount adapters that I've changed and modified. I redesigned the hub mounts. Well, okay, I will get to. Yeah, well, I did show yesterday to these guys on the show with me the GoPro mount, and basically I made an articulated arm from it, and I'm able to mount my phone onto there, and it works really well. Now, I did redesign the hub mount that I use on my 1GX after the old one broke off, and I was able to reprint it. I thought I might have to bulk up some of the fittings for the mount itself, but since the 3D printer was under extruding the last time I printed it, I decided to keep that the same and just reduce some of the plastic housing around the USB ports to make the ports more accessible. I'm really happy with how it turned out. The mounting holds tightly to the device, and I don't have to fight to get the USB dongles attached anymore. I'm looking to see if I might want to add another one or a thin hub with HDMI to the other side as well. But that one will have to pass through fast charging because this takes like at least, 15 volts. I also redesigned the mount for the Jungle Cat controller from Razer, so that it will mount on the 1GX, and it is sturdy enough for me to hold them when they're both on there in a similar fashion to like a Switch or a GPD Win. And it's nice since I'm now using the 8-bit Dell on my phone. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see. I don't want to spend too much time trying to get this lined up, but yeah, it just slides in to the mounting on the side here. And I have this in on the other side, but for now, I'm just putting one in to show. And then that allows me to hold the device like that and game on it. Now, I spoke earlier about a phone mount for the 8-bit DOE controller. I found several on Thingiverse, but most of them, when it came to the phone portion, were extremely overcomplicated for what I wanted. And so I took one of the designs that used that modular GoPro mount that I've also discussed and redesigned the upper portion to take a heat set inset for 1/4-inch bolts so that I could use a standard phone mount with it, of which I have plenty of those, and I could easily attach it and remove it with no problems. I really like how it turned out, and I'm glad that I purchased a couple of different sets of nuts and bolts to use with all of these things. Because yeah, everything takes either the M5, the M4, or the M3, or a 1/4-inch. Other than that, I have several other simple designs that I have designed and printed that are extremely useful. I made a keyboard stand mount that uses the muslin spring clamps to attach to a table. I have found muslin spring clamps to be extremely helpful and valuable in a lot of things, whether it comes to gluing or mounting something to a table temporarily, being able to clip it on there and take it off. Just drill out the hole in the top of the muslin clamp a little bit and put a 1/4-inch bolt through, and you've got a portable camera mount, phone mount, whatever. And I have ordered more of them, and more should be here today. And the keyboard mount that I made for it is great for just setting my keyboard in front of me and out of the way, so I'm not setting it in under random places. I also found that if I move them a little bit closer together, I can set my 1GX on there, and that works great for typing, and the muslin clamps are more than strong enough to hold everything up. I also designed an adapter to my cup holder on my theater chair so that I could use my 40-ounce thermal cup or one of my 3D printed can holders. And because I removed my other cup holder adapter from my chair, I had to 3D print a right angle bracket, which then allows me to run a 1/4-inch bolt through it and hook up my phone/camera, or with another adapter, a microphone mount. So yeah, I've really been enjoying 3D printing lately. Till the next time my 3D printer breaks. Bill, what have you been up to?
Well, for my part, this week's wanderings will be short and sweet, I think. The last few weeks have been kind of crazy with regards to my day job, Monday through Friday. I've been back and forth to Mississippi, for example, about 6 times since I was on the show last, not to mention 4 trips out to Missouri and back. Anyway, not to bore you with that, I've had a few tech-related things going on. First is the 3ftpodcast.org website. A couple of weeks ago, I finally got around to building a proper website for my other show, 3 Fat Truckers. This new site is a proper WordPress site built by me from scratch on a Raspberry Pi 4 running Raspberry Pi OS. This new site is built using some of the things that I learned while administering the mintCast site. Previously, we were relying on the free Google Sites thing that you get when it's just a basic thing. You can set up like a simple little website with images and links and things like that, but it's not very robust. And while that served its purpose, the new site gives us the ability to do things we couldn't before. The Pi 4 has turned out to be a fantastic web server. I'll go so far as to say it outperforms the $5 Linode that we've got running the mintCast site, which makes sense given the Pi 4 has higher specs than the cheapest tier of the Linode we're currently using, which isn't to knock Linode service in any way, but in order to build a cloud server with comparable specs to the Pi 4, you would have to spend considerably more than $5 a month. I'm not sure exactly what it would cost to match the Pi 4 specs, but it would be quite a bit more than $5. And in fact, I invite the audience to follow the link in the show notes. If you get a free minute, follow that link and go have a look at the 3ftpodcast.org website. You know, I'm kind of interested to see how well it performs in different parts of the world, and I wouldn't mind getting some people's input on it. And yes, I know it looks just like mintcast.org. That's where I learned my evil craft. Another ongoing project is the Nextcloud server that I recently migrated from a Rock Pro 64 to a proper x86 machine to host the working files for the show, as well as personal photos and documents of my own. As I've described in previous episodes, I've been dealing with a problem with one of the 2 terabyte Seagate Ironwolf NAS drives that are running the ZFS mirror. And there's Joe showing off his 3D printed game controllers. Is that what those are?
Yeah, I just didn't want to take up time,
Yeah, that's cool.
so I was showing an image.
Now, that's just like the ones you can get for your phone, right?
Yeah, it's actually these are the Jungle Cat, the Razer Jungle Cats that I was talking about a couple weeks ago. So
Okay.
literally, they are made for a phone, but they're Bluetooth and they'll work just fine.
That's cool. They look like they were made for that thing. So anyway, moving on. The NAS drives were part of a ZFS mirror, and a problem I was having was an I/O error kept popping up on one of the drives, and which was interesting because the Ironwolf drives are usually pretty solid. I mean, they're about industry standard as far as I'm concerned for quality network detached storage. So I disconnected that drive from the pool and sent it to Seagate for a warrant, because it's still under warranty until 2025. And they promptly, I mean, I had, before the end of that next week, I had a replacement. And, you know, I was pretty happy with that. The Seagate's customer service is pretty spot on as far as I'm concerned. Interesting, while I was waiting for the replacement drive, though, I discovered what I now believe was the root cause of the problem all along. In each case, problems began when I turned on ZFS's native compression and chose the Z standard compression type. While I was waiting for the replacement drive, I turned on compression, and after a day or two, now, mind you, I still had the second drive, the one that didn't give me the I/O errors, was still in the machine. I turned the compression back on, and it started giving me the same errors on a single drive, I/O errors, and it was failing scrubs and things like that, and which kind of led me to believe that maybe it was the compression causing the problem all along. I turned off the compression, resilvered the drives, and haven't had a problem since. And then when I received the replacement drive, as I said, by the end of the week, one command, you don't even, with ZFS, you don't even, if you're putting a drive back into a pool, you don't even do any formatting. You just plug it in and then execute a zpool attach, and then you type in the physical location, well, the enumerated location of the first drive, and then the enumerated location of the second drive, and then it just resilvers that second drive and adds it to the mirror. And that might sound a little complicated if you're not used to working with the ZFS, but in terms of reintroducing hardware to a mirror, to any kind of RAID setup, that's actually one command that's actually pretty simple. And I've left compression off, and I've not had any problems since. So I I'm now sort of at the belief that maybe the compression was the cause of the problem all along, and it wasn't the fact that it was using a Rock Pro 64. But I'm not to go back and recreate that whole scenario and then try to track down whether or not that's true. That would take a lot of effort. I'd be interested to know from the audience if anybody's ever had anything similar to that happen. If so, let me know. In addition to working on the new 3FT website, I've done some tweaking on the mintCast site as well. I fixed a couple of issues that the site was having. One being the load time for the homepage. Some time back, I fixed a problem we were having with the RSS feed only delivering 10 of the most recent episodes. I first increased that number to 300, but noticed a terrible regression in page load times for the homepage of the website itself. And that was because it was trying to load all 300 of those feeds in the one page because of the way WordPress was set up to put that out there. So I turned that down to 50, and that improved things somewhat, but it's still 50 posts it has to show on the homepage, along with caching all of the media links, because that's another thing. Each one of those posts has an associated media link that gives a download link and a HTML embedded media player link for each individual episode, and that all has to be cached at page load time. And that was causing a bit of a performance issue. Well, I figured out how to fix that by only showing, right now I think it's showing 5 at a time while keeping 300. It gives you access to 300 of them at a time, one page at a time at 5 posts per page, if that makes sense. And that is essentially fixed the any of the problems with page load performance. I know for some people it was probably an obvious fix, but I've been on a learning curve as long as I've been on this show. My gosh, I probably learned as much since I've been doing mintCast as I've known all the years before that.
Amen.
Okay, so I also revamped a couple of aesthetic issues, such as how the link buttons are handled, using a couple of bespoke WordPress plugins rather than just pictures with links HTML hard-coded into them. There's 2 separate WordPress plugins I'm using. One handles the platform links that gives us little buttons to take you straight to the YouTube or to the Spotify or to the Google Podcasts or what have you. And then there's another plugin that handles all of our social buttons to go to our social networks and that. And I think they look a little bit sleeker, a little bit more modern, and we can easily add or take away buttons as we go along. In fact, I added a MeWe button to the socials on the website. So if anybody uses that, you've now got an easy way to go ahead and plug into it. And
I will state that nobody does, but
yeah, well,
I'm the only one that posts anything to MeWe anymore. Yeah.
I mean, it's there. You just never know when something's going to take off, I guess. If I could have predicted the trajectory of social media and the way that we would end up using the internet, I'd be a rich man right now. As it is, I was not able to predict any of this. So, yeah, the result of all that is a slightly more modern look and feel. And yeah, as I said, we can add and take away things as time goes on now. So yeah, go check out the new site. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to see changed about it, or if you think it's old and archaic. I think it's still somewhat modern. It's functional, and it's got everything we need on it. It's got all the it's there to sort of talk about the podcast and the things that we're talking about and give people an easy way to get connected to it. And I think it does all that relatively well. So But yeah, I welcome anybody that has anything to say about it. So that's all I got, though.
Feel free to take a look at itsmoss.com. We haven't been able to get that WordPress site to work right yet. To look right. We get it to work right, but even our banner logo is not displaying correctly. So,
I mean, a lot of it is just getting to know WordPress and how to get things to, I don't know. You get to playing around with the way images fit into certain spaces, and it looks like it should fit a certain way. But then again, the way the theme works, there's only so much space allocated for an image or something like that. So it looks like it should fit there, but then it don't. So I was having some trouble with that on the 3FT site because I wanted one of our photos to take up more space than it did, but there was just nothing I could, without getting into the actual HTML file of the theme itself, which I'm not there. That ain't me. Maybe it's you, Moss. I don't know.
not me, no.
Not you either. Okay.
Okay, well, that about does it for our bi-weekly wanderings. Let's keep moving. Linux innards. We are still going over the history of Linux as requested by a few of our viewers. How we got here. The first Linux was just the kernel plus the GNU toolkit in 1991. The first attempt at a complete user-friendly Linux was SLS, the Soft Landing Linux System, by Peter McDonald in August 1992. We focused on Red Hat and Mandrake last episode. This episode, we're going to concentrate on SLS, Slackware, SUSE, and their variants, and we'll cover Debian, Ubuntu, and Arch and its derivatives, and independent distros in episodes 400 and probably 401. This is a big topic, people. We've really been working hard on this.
There's a lot to it. It's a rich history, and it's only.
And we're just skimming the top.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
make a whole
We
podcast
tried-
out of it.
Yeah, we tried to do Debian in this episode. Well, I tried to add Debian to this episode as well, but there's just so much detailed information on the entire history of Debian that it's hard to parse it down to the interesting portions.
Yeah.
Okay, well, SLS and Slackware. SLS, Soft Landing Linux System, was one of the first Linux distributions. See, now my teeth decide not to work. The first release was by Peter McDonald in August 1992. Their slogan at the time was "Gentle Touchdowns for DOS Bailouts." SLS was the first release to offer a comprehensive Linux distribution containing more than the Linux kernel, GNU, and other basic utilities, including an implementation of the X Windows system. SLS was the most popular Linux distribution at the time, but it was considered to be rather buggy by its users. It was soon superseded by Slackware and Yggdrasil Linux/GNU/X, among others. Similarly, Ian Murdoch's frustration with SLS led him to create the Debian project, which we will discuss in a future episode. Slackware. Slackware simply is the most significant version of Linux in existence. Other distros either attempt to emulate it or use it as an example of how not to make a user-friendly Linux distro. Only Debian approaches its level of significance, mostly on how it made different decisions from Slackware.
You need me to take it from here?
I'll try and keep going.
Okay.
Slackware was created by Patrick Volkerding in 1993. Originally based on Soft Landing Linux System, Slackware has been the basis for many other Linux distributions, most notably the first versions of SUSE Linux distributions, and is the oldest distribution that is still maintained. Bong.
Sorry.
Those were intentional sound effects, people.
Yes, they were. Dig our theatrical skills.
Volkerding had no intentions to provide his modified SLS version for the public. He assumed that SLS would be putting out a new version that included these things soon enough, so he held off for a few weeks. Many SLS users on the internet were asking SLS for a new release, so eventually Volkerding made a post titled, quote, "Anyone want an SLS like 0.99PL11A system," end quote, to which he received many positive responses. Volkerding obtained permission to upload Slackware to the university's FTP server. Version 1.00 was distributed on July 19, 1993 at 001636 UTC and was supplied as 24 3.5-inch floppy disk images. Volkerding then watched as the flood of FTP connections continually crashed the server. Soon afterwards, Walnut Creek CD-ROM offered additional archive space on their FTP servers. Now, there's a whole nother rabbit hole to fall down if we wanted to talk about Walnut Creek and their involvement with Slackware. I am going to avoid that in this article. Slackware aims to be the most Unix-like Linux distribution. It makes as few modifications as possible to software packages from upstream and tries not to anticipate use cases or preclude user decisions. Slackware provides no graphical installation procedure and no automatic dependency resolution of software packages. It uses plain text files and only a small set of shell scripts for configuration and administration. Without further modification, it boots into a command line interface environment. Because of this, Slackware is often considered to be most suitable for advanced and technically inclined Linux users. Slackware is available for IA32 and x86-64 architectures with a port to the ARM architecture. While Slackware is mostly free and open source software, it does not have a formal bug tracking facility or public code repository. There is no formal membership procedure for developers, and Volkerding is the primary contributor to releases. Slackware refers to the pursuit of Slack, a tenet of the Church of the Subgenius, a parody religion which branched off the Discordian Society. Certain aspects of Slackware graphics reflect this, such as the pipe that Tux is shown smoking. References to the Church of the Subgenius can be found in many versions of the install.end text files, which indicate the end of a software series to the setup program. In recent versions, including Slackware Release 14.1, the text is ROT13 obfuscated, whatever that means. It was very clear to make that statement. The text is ROT13 obfuscated. Some of you know. If you don't know, you weren't meant to know. In 1999, Slackware jumped from version 4 to version 7. Slackware version numbers were lagging behind other distributions, and this led many users to believe it was out of date, even though the bundled software versions were similar. Volkerding made the decision as a marketing effort to infer that Slackware was as up-to-date as other Linux distributions, estimating that most other distributions would soon be at their own version 7. In April 2004, Patrick Volkerding added the x.org server packages into the testing/directory of -current as a replacement for the x386 packages then being used, with a request for comments on what the future of the X Windows system in Slackware should be. A month later, he switched completely to the x.org server. The opinions were more than 4-1 in favor of using the x.org release as the default. Slackware 10.0 was the first release with x.org server. In March 2005, he announced the removal of the GNOME desktop environment. Volkerding stated future GNOME support would rely on the community. The community responded, and as of October 2016, there are several active GNOME projects for Slackware. These include Cinnamon, Blackware, Dropline GNOME, Mate, and Slack Mate. This action was deemed significant by some in the Linux community. In May 2009, he announced the public development release of an official x86-64 variant called Slackware 64, maintained in parallel with the IA32 distribution. Slackware 64 is a pure 64-bit distribution in that it does not support running or compiling 32-bit programs. However, it was designed as multi-lib ready. Eric Hameliers, one of the core Slackware team members, maintains a multi-lib repository that contains the necessary packages to convert Slackware 64 to multi-lib to enable running of 32-bit software. Volkerding tested the port in December 2008 and was impressed when he saw speed increases between 20 and 40% for some benchmarks compared to the 32-bit version. To minimize the extra effort of maintaining both versions in parallel, Slack builds were slowly transitioned to supporting either architecture, allowing for one set of sources for both versions. Slackware 64 saw its first stable release with version 13.0. The gap between the November 2013 release of 14.1 and the June 2016 release of 14.2 marked the longest span in release history. During this time, the development branch went without updates for as long as 47 days. However, on April 21, 2015, Patrick Volkerding apologized for the absence of updates and stated that the development team used the time to get some good work done. There were over 700 program changes listed on that changelog entry, including many major library upgrades. In January 2016, Volkerding announced the reluctant addition of Pulse Audio. Knowing some users would not be happy with the change, he stated that, quote, bug reports, complaints, and threats can go to me, end quote. That's him, not me. The design philosophy of Slackware is oriented towards simplicity, software purity, and a core design that emphasizes lack of change to upstream sources. In this context, simple refers to the simplicity of the system design rather than system usage. Thus, ease of use may vary between users. Those lacking knowledge of command line interfaces and classic Unix tools may experience a steep learning curve using Slackware, whereas users with a Unix background may benefit from a less abstract system environment. There is no formal issue tracking system and no official procedure to become a code contributor or developer. The project does not maintain a public code repository. Bug reports and contributions, while being essential to the project, are managed in an informal way. All the final decisions about what is going to be included in a Slackware release strictly remain with Patrick Volkerding.
I stop you real quick, Moss, and do a quick, while you were talking, I did a little research on what ROT13 obfuscation is. And that is indeed where you replace each letter with a letter 13 characters away in the alphabet.
Ooh.
So
rotation 13.
Yeah, it's right. So A is N, B is O, C is P, and on and on and on. So if you was to obfuscate something with that sort of simple algorithm, then it's just a matter of creating a table that lines those letters up with each other and then rewriting whatever it is you're trying to hide.
You now have secret information.
Yeah.
React responsibly.
You are welcome.
Eric Hamelier's essay on the history of Slackware development, written on October 3rd and 4th of 2009, shortly after the release of 13.0, lends a lot of insight into the development of the Slackware team. Slackware's package management system, collectively known as PKG tools, can administer, install, upgrade, and remove packages from local sources. It can also uncompress and create packages. Slack Package is a tool to update Slackware over a network or the internet, and was used in extras since Slackware 9.1, but not officially included in the main tree until Slackware 12.2. Slackware packages are tarballs compressed using various methods. Starting with 13.0, most packages are compressed using XZ and use the TXZ file name extension. Packages contain all the files for that program, as well as additional metadata files used by the package manager. The package management system does not track or manage dependencies. For custom installations or third-party packages, Slackware relies on the user to ensure that the system has all the supporting system libraries and programs required by the program. Since no official lists of dependencies for stock packages are provided, if users decide to install a custom installation or install third-party software, they will need to work through any possible missing dependencies themselves. Since the package manager doesn't manage dependencies, it will install any and all packages, whether or not dependencies are met. A user may find out that dependencies are missing only when attempting to use the software. There are no official repositories for Slackware. The only official packages Slackware provides are available on the installation media. However, there are many third-party repositories for Slackware. Some are standalone repositories, and others are for distributions that are Slackware-based but retain package compatibility with Slackware. Many of these can be searched at once in pkgs.org. However, mixing and matching dependencies from multiple repositories can lead to 2 or more packages that require different versions of the same dependency, which is a form of dependency hell. Some projects will provide a list of dependencies that are not included with the files for the package, commonly with a .dep extension. As for later developments, there is we have Salix. Salix is a Slackware-based Linux distribution that is simple, fast, easy to use, and compatible with Slackware Linux. Optimized for desktop use, Salix OS features 1 application per task on the installation ISO, fully backwards compatible with Slackware, optimized for desktop usage, high-quality package repositories with dependency support, incredibly fast package tools, simple and fully localized system administration tools, and it supports 32-bit and 64-bit architectures. Slackware users can benefit from Salix repositories, which they can use as an extra quality source of software for their favorite distribution. The installation is text dialogue based, but easy to navigate and complete. It is also very fast. A full mode installation will take less than 5 minutes on any modern PC. Bill, I think I'm worn out. Can you pick up with Vector?
Well done,
Hey,
Moss.
why don't you let me pick up with Vector, and then you can pick up at Susa where you're marked. How's
Yeah,
that sound?
fine. Yep.
Whatever works, guys. Thanks a lot.
Well done,
Yeah.
though, Moss. That was
This innards is basically all Moss's work. I think it actually is all
this
Moss's
show
work.
is a lot of fantastic work, Moss.
Yeah. Now, Vector Linux is a small, fast, Intel-based Linux operating system for PC-style computers. Originally developed by Canadian developers Robert S. Lang and Daryl Stavum. Since version 7, the standard edition is also available for the x86-64 platform known as Velocity 64-7. One prominent feature that all VL versions have in common is the standard installation of system administration applications. VAS-MCC handles system configuration with slapt-get with its GUI front end. gslapt manages software installation and removal. VAS-MCC stands for Vector Administration and Services Menu Control Center, and it configures everything from disk partitions to Xorg server, in addition to offering a GUI interface. A text mode parallel to the GUI, VASM-CC, is available. VASM-CC has been available since Vector 2.0 was released and has been upgraded continually over the years, with the addition of GUI functionality in Soho 3.2. Configuration tools like netconfig and alsaconf are also available in Vector. gslapt is a GUI front end to the slapt-get software management tool combined with ISMA compression and dependency tracking.
LZMA.
LZMA? Thank you.
LZMA.
Of gslapt offers Vector Linux users the ability to quickly install and remove software while avoiding dependency hell. File compression via LZMA allows low and high bandwidth users alike to minimize download times. Vector Linux is currently available in standard, light, and live editions.
I want to point out that LZMA is a version of the Lempel-Zev-Huffman compression algorithms.
Cool.
That's what the LZ comes from, is Lempel-Zev.
Cool. Moving on to Playmo. Playmo Linux is, did I say that right? Playmo, Plamo. Playmo
Well,
Linux.
I'm not Japanese, so I don't know. It could be
Okay.
Plamo. We don't know.
Playmo Linux is a Japanese Linux distribution based on Slackware Linux. The installer and many text-based and graphical tools have been updated to include Japanese language support. Several prominent desktop environments are available. More information is available at playmolinux.org if you can read Japanese, or if Google does a really good job translating. Also, there is ZenWalk. ZenWalk Linux, formerly Mini Slack, is a Slackware-based GNU Linux operating system with a goal of being slim and fast. By using only one application per task and with a focus on graphical desktop and multimedia usage. ZenWalk features the latest Linux technology along with a complete programming environment and libraries to provide an ideal platform for application programmers. ZenWalk's modular approach also provides a simple way to convert ZenWalk Linux into a finely tuned modern server. I wonder how well it would work on like small form factor systems or really low power systems. On February 4th, 2022, ZenWalk released version 15 based on and compatible with Slackware 15. What you get is a pure Slackware system with the following main changes. Focused on desktop usage, XFCE and Chromium based, just one app for each task, latest version of the most user-friendly apps, optimized in size/RAM footprint. ZenWalk is very fast on latest hardware and can even run fast on old PCs. Flatpak and app image ready. Almost all existing apps can be installed either via right-clicking on app image or a Flatpak ref file. Automated packages updates, daily check at startup, simplified setup with no nonsense, animated pink ponies. All donations to ZenWalk are forwarded to Patrick Volkerding for use in developing Slackware. So yeah, it does say that it can be used on old PCs and probably just small form factor PCs with low power. So yeah, that's really cool. It's not. I'm sure it's got a larger footprint than say like Puppy Linux or something like that, but still, it's nice to have a Slackware.
Well, I did like
for
that last point that they're completely free. They don't take donations, but if you send them donations, they send them to Patrick so that he can work on Slackware more.
That's cool.
There is one thing that we did not discuss, which maybe we shouldn't discuss, which is that there was a Slackware store that used to give money to Patrick from its profits. And sometime back around version 14, they stopped giving Patrick any money. And so he has had to find other funding sources.
I remember that his house.
Yeah.
There was a big write-up about that. His house was in ill
Several write-ups.
repair. Yeah.
Like the company just completely quit paying him any money, and he was still developing for it.
Yeah, that's a sorry state of affairs.
Well, that's about all we have on Slackware. Let's move on into SUSE.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to tackle SUSE here now. Admittedly, I've not used it much, but SUSE has a place in my heart because it is the first distribution I ever actually installed back in 2002. You used to be able to find box sets of SUSE, or what they call OpenSUSE now. It was just SUSE back then. Box sets of DVDs and CDs, and along with printed material at Best Buy or other places like that. And so I got a hold of a copy, and I remember it being interesting. I never really got it to work in anger because I was using AOL in those days, and I couldn't work out how to get a dial-up modem working on Linux. So it wasn't until a few years later that I actually was able to use Linux in full force. But anyway, SUSE and OpenSUSE. SUSE Linux is a computer operating system built on top of the free and open source Linux kernel and is distributed with system and application software from other open source projects. SUSE Linux is of German origin, its name being an acronym of Software und System. And you say this, Moss.
Software und Systementwicklung.
Or software and systems development in English. And it was mainly developed in Europe. The first version appeared in early 1994, making SUSE one of the oldest existing commercial distributions. It is known for its YAST configuration tool, yet another system tool for any of those that don't know. The developing, maybe
You
I
need
should.
me for this one?
Yeah.
The Developing Gesellschaft für Software und Systementwicklung, MBH, literally Company for Software and System Development, was founded on September 2nd, 1992 in Nuremberg, Germany by Roland Dirhoff, Thomas Fair, Burkhard Steinbild, and Hubert Mantel.
Yeah, I
Okay.
couldn't have done that either.
I lived there for 4 years.
So did I.
Fair had already graduated and was working as a software engineer. The original idea was that the company would develop software and function as an advisory Unix group. According to Mantel, the group decided to distribute Linux, offering support. Their name at founding was SUSE, Software twice, really, Moss?
With periods. S period, small u period, capital S periods, capital E period. However, the full name has never been used.
Yeah, for obvious reasons. But it just really just a repeat of what we said a minute ago. However, the full name was never been used, yes, and was shortened to SUSE in October 1998 and restylized to SUSE.
All capital letters.
Yeah. In 2003. I suppose I always knew that that was an acronym. I just didn't. I just always assumed that it was something in German. The official logo and current mascot of the distribution is a veiled chameleon, officially named Gecko, a portmanteau of gecko. Portmanteau of gecko and geek. As with the company's name, the Gecko logo has evolved to reflect company's name and changes. The company started as a service provider, regularly releasing software packages that included soft landing Linux system, SLS, now defunct, and Slackware, and printing Unix and Linux manuals and offering technical assistance. These third-party products SUSE initially used had those characteristics and were managed by SUSE in different fashions. In mid-1992, Peter McDonald created the comprehensive Linux distribution known as SLS, which offered elements such as X and TCP/IP. This was distributed to people who wanted to get Linux via floppy disks. In 1993, Patrick Volkerding cleaned up the SLS Linux distribution, releasing a newer version of Slackware. In 1994, with help from Patrick Volkerding, Slackware scripts were translated into German, which was marked as the first release of SUSE Linux 1.0 distribution. It was available first on floppies and then on CDs. To build its own Linux distribution, SUSE and SLS in 1992 and Jurix in 1996 as starting point. This was created by Florian Laroche, who joined the SUSE team. He began to develop YAST, the installer and configuration tool that would become the central point of the distribution. In 1996, the first distribution under the name SUSE Linux was published as SUSE Linux 4.2, a reference to the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. YAST's first version number, 0.42, was a similar reference. Over time, SUSE Linux incorporated many aspects of Red Hat Linux, such as its RPM package manager and its file structure. SUSE became the largest Linux distributor in Germany. In 1997, SUSE LLC was established under the direction of president and managing partner James Gray in Oakland, California, which enabled the company to develop Linux markets in the Americas and Asia. While Red Hat was ubiquitous in the United States, SUSE Linux continued to grow in Germany as well as in Nordic countries such as Finland and Sweden. In October 1998, the name was changed officially to SUSE, without periods, that is. Linus Torvalds, the creator of the Linux kernel, used it fairly often. SUSE entered the UK in 1999. In 2001, the company was forced to reduce its staff significantly in order to survive. Novell bought the SUSE brands and trademarks in 2003, although it is rumored that the money for purchasing the project came from the rival Microsoft when it was determined that their own purchase of the project might involve antitrust issues. Novell employed more than 500 developers working on SUSE in 2004. On 27 April 2011, Novell and SUSE were acquired by the Attachmate Group, which made SUSE an independent business unit. In October 2014, the entire Attachmate Group, including SUSE, was acquired by the British firm Micro Focus International. SUSE continued to operate as an independent business unit. On July 2nd, 2018, it was announced that Micro Focus would sell SUSE to Blitz 1869 GmbH, a subsidiary of EQT Partners, for $2.535 billion. That's real money, folks. The acquisition was completed on March 18th, 2019. On August 4th, 2005, Novell announced that the SUSE Professional Series would become more open with the launch of the OpenSUSE project community. The software always had been open source, but OpenSUSE opened the development process, allowing developers and users to test and development. Previously, all development work had been accomplished in-house by SUSE. Version 10.0 was the first version that offered public beta testing. SUSE Linux 10.0 included both open source and proprietary applications and retail boxed set editions. As part of the change, YAST online update server access became free for all SUSE Linux users, and also for the first time, the GNOME desktop was upgraded to equal status with the traditional KDE. In November 2005, SUSE founder Herbert Mantel announced his resignation from the company. He stated that Novell's acquisition had changed SUSE beyond his expectations and that he did not believe it was the same company that he had founded 13 years earlier. The resignation apparently stemmed from a dispute over the implementation of the Symbian products in the GNOME-based default desktop environment for the Linux distribution. He rejoined the company a year later. That's interesting. On November 3rd, 2006, renewed July 25th, 2011, Novell signed an agreement with Microsoft covering improvement of SUSE's ability to interoperate with Microsoft Windows, cross-promotion, marketing of both products, and patent cross-licensing. The agreement is considered controversial by some of the free software community. When Attachmate bought Novell, the U.S. government required changes in the patent and license, to wit: all of Novell patents will be acquired subject to the GNU General Public License version 2, a widely adopted open source license, and the Open Invention Network, or OIN, license, a significant license for the Linux system. CPTN does not have the right to license to limit which of the patents, if any, are available under the OIN license, and Neither CPTN nor its owners will make any statement or take any action with the purpose of influencing or encouraging either Novell or attachmate to make which of the patents are available under the OIN license. SUSE provides a 13-year product life cycle for SUSE Linux Enterprise 11 and 12. SLES also features versions for specific uses such as point-of-sale versions. OpenSUSE has a theoretical development cycle of 8 months and a lifetime of 18 months for the date of release. It is fully and freely available for immediate download. OpenSUSE is a freely available community project that releases versions on comparatively frequent basis and generally uses the latest versions of the various open source projects that it includes. It currently is provided in static called Leap and rolling called Tumbleweed versions.
It can be pointed out that when equity partners bought OpenSUSE for that gigantic sum of money, SUSE was one of only 2 Linuxes that was making money on the open market, the other being Red Hat.
Yeah.
And IBM paid a lot more than that for Red Hat.
Okay, moving on. We have Gecko. Gecko Linux is a Linux distribution based on OpenSUSE. It is available in 2 editions, Static, which is based on OpenSUSE Leap, and Rolling, which is based on OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. Releases tend to be nearly in sync with OpenSUSE. Releases are numbered the same. The intention is to make it easier to install, but have the resulting installation as similar to OpenSUSE as possible. Some of the Gecko Linux's features include improved font rendering, live ISOs with various desktop environments, offline Calamares installer. Package kit is not used or installed by default. Pre-configured Pacman repository, proprietary media codecs, and drivers are pre-installed. Recommended packages are not forcefully installed as recommended dependencies after installation, and it has TLP for power management. Gecko is known to have an easier installation and learning curve to OpenSUSE, but with a much smaller development team, it may be slow at responding to issues. And this leads us to EasyNAS. The Israel-based distro is little known, but highly regarded as a network appliance server. EasyNAS is a storage management system for home or small office. It uses OpenSUSE Leap as a base and with the BTRFS advanced file system. EasyNAS is managed through a web-based interface and offers such features as online growing of file systems, snapshots, and copy on write. And yeah,
Okay.
I know a lot of people use EasyNAS on a regular basis, but I think I've installed it once, but never really used it.
That's it for this episode. Next episode, we'll be covering Ubuntu and derivatives, including Mint. And the following episode, it looks like we're covering Debian and its some of its non-Ubuntu derivatives, and Arch, and all the Arches. And at some point, we'll get around to the other indies, such as LFS and Solus. But
Yeah,
that's
this
going to
might
wrap
run
us up.
several. Yeah, this might run several more episodes.
It could. See what you get for asking questions?
That was a good idea. It's been a
I've
heck of a
enjoyed
learning
it.
process,
Yeah.
for all of us, I think. So,
Okay, moving on. Vibrations from the ether. I think, Bill, this one's yours.
yeah. So to preface, in a previous episode, I was talking about cloud offerings and how cloud services are billed only for the time that a machine is up, and I inaccurately described that. And this is basically a Well, anyway, Hank Barta wrote into the show. Thanks for covering VPSs in a recent episode, he writes. But I'm not sure that some of the claims are accurate. The language I heard was along the lines of you only pay for hosts that are running. I'm 99% certain that the user is charged for hosts that are configured whether or not they are running. That could lead to a rude surprise if somebody configures a powerful host and then shuts it down thinking they're not going to be charged. Best, Hank. Yeah, thanks, Hank. You're absolutely right. If you build a VPS on, let's say, Linode or DigitalOcean or any of the others, and it's sitting there as a machine that you built, it's taking up space on their server, and you will be charged. I'm fairly certain an hourly rate for the existence of that server. So I was partly right, but I guess I was just thinking the way my mind works. I'm not going to build one of these things unless I'm going to fire it up and use it. So yeah, thanks for writing in, Hank. You're absolutely correct, and my apologies to anybody that went and built something and then got billed for something they weren't using. But yeah.
Well, that's all our vibrating this episode. Let's move on. Check this out. Somebody posted a check this
Yeah,
out.
that's me.
That's you. Okay. Cool.
So there's been a little bit of buzz on other shows, and I thought I'd bring this up on our show. There's a project out there, and I linked to an article on itsfoss.com, not to be confused with itsmoss.com, which
We would like people to confuse them.
I was just getting ready to say is far more popular than itsfoss, or do I have that backwards? I don't know. Anyway, Lure, Lure, is a project which is a rather ambitious project, open source, that is aiming to bring the benefits of the AUR to other distributions. Now, real quick, I'll describe what the AUR is. On Arch Linux and Arch-based distros, you have three main package repositories that work somewhat similar to what you would expect to see from like a Ubuntu derivative that you would access with something like apt. And in addition to that, you can install applications that are not available in those repositories using a thing they call the AUR, or Arch User Repository. Now, to be clear, the AUR is not a repository of packages. Rather, it is a repository of scripts. And in these scripts, describe the necessary dependencies, application dependencies, the necessary build dependencies. In other words, the applications that Arch needs to build the package, and then where exactly to go and download the source file for the application itself, and then any other instructions it might need to build that package. So you are building from source, but it simplifies the process by creating a script that can be executed with one command. And then once that program is built, it's basically cataloged in the system, and it's updated using whatever method you choose. And with Arch, there's a few. You can either update them yourself, or you can use a helper like Yay, or Yay is kind of a derivative of YowArt, which I guess doesn't exist anymore, but there's others. And then there's a couple of graphical tools that are mainly the good ones are maintained by Manjaro and projects like that. But Lure basically is trying to make that AUR accessible to other distributions that use other types of package managers. And the reason I say that is ambitious is not just because the scope of providing access to other distributions, but the fact that you have to rename all the tooling to be appropriate for each individual distribution. Now, if you go to the link that I've got here, the website itself or the article on itsfoss lists towards the bottom some of the downloadable binaries, and it's everything from debs to RPMs to even APKs for ARM, and then all the way at the bottom there's one there for RISC 64. So these folks are trying to make this whole thing meaningful for as many people as possible, and it'd be real interesting to see how far this goes, because I think the AUR is a useful tool. I don't think it's appropriate for everyone, because you do have the potential of introducing software into your system that could cause some problems that the distribution maintainer might not be prepared to support. For example, if you go to the AUR, you could install more up-to-date versions of things that are in the Ubuntu toolchain or the Debian toolchain, and then you run into problems with other pieces of software that are trying to access older versions of applications in that toolchain, and then you end up with a problem. And if you don't know what you're doing, it could seem like it's Debian's fault or it's Ubuntu's fault, and here it is because you've installed this thing. So it's interesting, it's ambitious, potentially dangerous, but I think if you're an advanced user, this might be a useful tool for getting packages that might not be available any other way.
Your dog sounded really excited about it.
Yeah. Joe's dog has an opinion.
Okay. Well, that's it for Check This Out. Housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like to hear about, tell us, as you'll be hearing for the next 3 or 4 episodes. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at https://mintcast.org. Our next episode is number 400. It'll be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, November 13th, 2022. And we have a link to get that converted to your local time zone. Our next live stream is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Daylight Time on Saturday, November 5th. And for information, clocks fall back 1 hour on November 6th. And we have a link to get that converted to your time zone. Our next live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, November 19th. And there's a link to get that converted to your local time zone. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. Wrapping this thing up, Joe, where can we find more of you?
Well, I'm on a couple other podcasts. You can catch me at tllts.org. That's for the Linux Link Tech Show. LinuxLugcast.com. That's for the Linux Lugcast. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee at my Ko-fi link in the show notes.
And you can find more of me at Full Circle Weekly News and Distro Hoppers Digest, a new episode coming out real soon. bardmoss@pm.me is my email address, and other information is found at itsmoss.com. Bill?
Well, you can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord. I'm at WCHauser3 on Twitter and the same on Facebook. Also, check out my other podcast if you fancy watching three fat guys talk about next to nothing. The website is 3ftpodcast.org. Name of that show is 3 Fat Truckers.
And Norbert wasn't here, but you can email him at norbert@mintcast.org. Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make Mintcast possible. Norbert, Londoner, Tony Hughes, Audio Freak Rio, and others for our audio editing. Josh Lowe and Bill Hauser for all his work on the website, all their work on the website. Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for our time syncs. Bill for hosting the Linode, which runs our website. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. And the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks,
Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Just over 2.5 hours. 1.5 hours.
Excellent.